Hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Twisted Tales Studio channel, the horror agnostic channel where we celebrate spooky stories in all of its media formats. Whether it's books, film, TVs, video games, we love us some scary stories, and today I want to talk about a subgenre that is near and dear to my heart, and that is cosmic horror. I even broke out the Kraken mug for the occasion. Look, it's got a little octopus on it. I love it. Now, I will start off by acknowledging that no discussion of cosmic horror gets very far without talking about the works of the great H.P. Lovecraft. Yes, Lovecraft, the father of cosmic horror, the great elder gods, the great Cthulhu, who I have a plushie of right here in the background. Our dear Howard could really spin a tale and make you feel small and insignificant in this universe. He taught us what it was to fear the unknown by digging into his fears of literally anybody who wasn't white. Yes, Lovecraft is extremely problematic, and even by the standards of the time he lived in, he was incredibly bigoted. Calling him problematic is putting it very lightly, let's just say that. Some of his stories are not bad. The subtext is there, but you can kind of ignore it. But then there are other stories where it's just so blatant and shoved in your face that I feel really weird reading them or listening to them, since I really like listening to audiobooks. There was one point when I was listening to a compilation called the Necronomicon, which was just a bunch of Lovecraft short stories all strung together. And I believe it was Rats in the Walls, where the main character had this cat, and it's a black cat, and Lovecraft, in his infinite wisdom, had his character name the cat something super racist, and just, it was... This guy kept saying the name of the cat over and over, and at that point I just I paused the story. I couldn't. There's only so much of that I could take, and that met that quota so fast. So typically, if I'm in the mood for cosmic horror and monsters and stuff like that, I try and err on the side of something a little bit more modern. I'm a huge fan of the Hellboy series, which I won't include in this list. I might include it in a part 2 list where I do comics specifically, but I am going to keep this list as just novels. Because, surprise, surprise, our dear friend Howard also had quite a strong influence on modern horror comics as well as pulp fiction, so it all just goes hand in hand. So for those of you who are like me and are looking for a little bit of cosmic horror with a little bit more of a modern sensibility, I've compiled a list here for you today of my favorite modern cosmic horror novels. My goal is to say the words cosmic horror as many times as I can in the span of about 20 minutes. So here we go. In no particular order, here is my list of my favorite cosmic horror novels. First off, we are going to start with The Fisherman by John Langan. In an isolated corner of upstate New York lies the Dutchman's Creek. Flowing out of the Ashokan Reservoir, the river is deep, steep-banked, and fast-moving, and it offers promise of fine fishing and something more. The story follows Abe and Dan, who are two widowers who basically learn to cope with their grief through a mutual joy of fishing. One weekend, Dan suggests that the two of them check out this Dutchman's Creek, a fishing location he discovered in an old journal. Along the way there, it starts raining really badly, so they stop at a diner where they hear a story from a local about how Dutchman's Creek was formed. The story jumps back and forth between present day and the past during the construction of the dam that created the reservoir. Meanwhile, the mysterious Der Fischer casts a long shadow over the creek, both past and present. This book is currently rocking a 3.95 on Goodreads, and I will admit I started with this one because it's my favorite book in the list. So I'm a little bit biased. And it's not even because this book is super action-packed or anything. In fact, this is quite a slow burn book. I can see a lot of people having a hard time getting through, particularly the first part of the book, before they even get to the diner or hearing about Dutchman's Creek at all. And the prose and the wording are very much reminiscent of classic literature. So If that sort of writing style isn't your bag, you're probably not gonna like this. But if you do like really classic horror and you want something that was written a little bit more recently, then this checks all those boxes. It has a dark sorcerer, it has monsters, basically everything you'd want in a cosmic horror novel, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The second book on my list is The Worm and His Kings by Haley Piper. When you slip through the cracks, nobody's there to catch you. Monique learns this the hard way when her girlfriend Donna disappears. The police won't look for Donna, so it's up to Monique to chase the rumors of a taloned beast snatching homeless people off the streets at night. To save the one she loves, she must face a world of mysterious cultists and monsters from beyond our time and space. The Worm and His Kings is currently rocking a 4.19 on Goodreads, and this is another one I'm putting early on this list because I really enjoyed it, and I actually read this one quite recently, so maybe I might be giving it a bit of a, not even a nostalgia bump. What's the opposite of a nostalgia bump? An anti-nostalgia bump? A honeymoon phase bump. But yeah, this one is very blatantly Lovecraftian. From the cults to the style of the monsters to the bending of space and time. The worm is basically an elder god. The kings are cultists. So if you like the style of Lovecraft and how he has his mythos set up with the elder gods, you will really like this. I also wanted to include this book because it has really great representation for the LGBTQ plus community, and I also follow the author on Twitter, and she's very active in the community as well. So if that's something you're looking for in your horror, is a little bit more representation, The Worm and His Kings is a really good option. The next book on my list is The Deep by Nick Cutter. A mysterious plague known to many as the Gets is decimating humanity. Think of it as like Alzheimer's on overdrive, but also contagious. But deep down below the surface of the ocean, in the heart of the Marianas Trench, is a miracle compound called ambrosia, which might just hold the key to curing this disease. In order to save humanity, our main character must travel 8 miles below the surface of the ocean, where his innermost fears are waiting in dark corners. This book is currently rocking a 3.3 on Goodreads, which blows me away. I really like this book. I was surprised when it was at less than a 3.5. Yeah, apparently most people really prefer Nick Cutter's previous book, The Troop, which I've also read, and it's also amazing, but I like The Deep better, so maybe I'm biased. I don't know. I really like horror that takes place in the deep sea or in outer space, just because you really get that claustrophobic feeling and you're so isolated that there's no prayer that you're going to get help from the outside. And The Deep definitely checks off all of these boxes. It's a very claustrophobic, very psychological horror tale. Nick Cutter is like weirdly good at writing very graphic descriptions of body horror. So if that's something that floats your boat, I'm not shaming. I was really into it. I listened to it in audiobook form while at work the one day, and that was a big mistake because I had all sorts of goosebumps and I could not concentrate. So yeah, I recommend The Deep by Nick Cutter, and also if you like the style of how he writes, The Troop is good, and he also has another book that came out more recently. I believe it's called Little Heaven. So check all those out, they're great. The next book on my list is The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. After going through a really rough divorce, Kara moves in with her uncle. While her uncle is sick in the hospital, she discovers a hole in the wall leading into a mysterious bunker. Scrawled on the wall of this bunker are the words, "Pray they're hungry." Outside the bunker door is a strange sort of in-between world filled with other bunkers leading to countless different realities. But this strange in-between place is haunted by creatures that seem to hear your thoughts, and if they find you, pray they're hungry, because the alternative is much, much worse. This book is currently rocking a 3.84 on Goodreads, and I will say up front that I think that this is probably the least scary and graphic book on this list, although that doesn't mean that there aren't like super scary moments. There are a few body horror moments that were super creepy to read and that I really enjoyed. Think of this book like If the wardrobe in Narnia led to a realm where monsters that like to disassemble their victims are roaming free. Yeah, that pretty accurately describes kind of what's going on here and the type of horror that I'm talking about. It also has a lot of really great dark humor. Like, there's a lot of really witty banter between the main character and her friend who works at the coffee shop next door, who gets dragged into this whole situation too. I really like the relationship between the two of them and the nice banter going back and forth between the two of them. It's really a delight to read, and it breaks the tension nicely between the different horror set pieces that are in the book. So yeah, The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. I really recommend it. Next up on my list is Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. I almost feel like it's cheating including this on my list as a recommendation, seeing as that it just came out recently as a TV series on HBO. But I really recommend reading the book. The TV series also did a great job, so if you've already seen the TV series, you might as well support the author and read the book as well, because it's great. The synopsis goes thusly. In 1954, when his father goes missing, Atticus Turner embarks on a road trip to find and rescue him. Accompanying him on his way are his Uncle George and his childhood friend Letitia. Together they encounter the mundane and supernatural terrors of New England. This book is currently rocking a 4.4 on Goodreads, and for good reason. It's an awesome read. As the title would suggest, it alludes to Lovecraft as a person and author who exists in this universe, and he writes fiction. So Atticus has to go to Ardham in Massachusetts. Obviously he's looking at it like, is this a joke? Is Arkham, like, what? You've got your cults, you've got your monsters, you've got your elder gods. This book also explores a little bit of the problematic racism that Lovecraft included in his books, spins it on its head, and gives some of the narrative power back to the people that Lovecraft most marginalized when he was alive. So yeah, this is a fun adventure of a book. I really enjoyed it. Definitely pick this up to read and check out the HBO series if you can. And speaking of twisting the narrative back on its head, the next book on our list is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. Charles Thomas Tester hustles day in and day out to make a living, keep food on the table, and to keep a roof over his head. One day, when he delivers an ancient tome to a sorceress in the heart of Queens, Tom opens a door to a deeper realm of magic and accidentally catches the eyes of beings best left sleeping. This is a novella, and it is currently rocking a 3.9 on Goodreads. Now, this story is a straight-up retelling of the horror at Red Hook. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is considered to be one of Lovecraft's more problematic stories, which is gonna sound really bad when I tell you that I do recommend reading it before reading The Ballad of Black Tom. Not because I support the racism in the context of the original story, but reading the original story will give you a starting point, and it will give you context for how Victor LaValle recontextualizes the horror at Red Hook to see how the author plays off the racism in the original story. It kind of reminds me of an exercise that I did in English class in elementary school, where we would have to rewrite fables from the point of view of the character who's supposed to be the antagonist. Think of it as like Shrek 1 and 2 in that sense. This book is also very, very short. You can blitz through it pretty quickly, so it's definitely worth picking up if you have actually read quite a few of Lovecraft's original fictions. Next up on my list is The Mist by Stephen King. Now, this one is also a novella. It was actually originally included in the Skeleton Crew anthology. The synopsis goes thusly. In the small town of Brighton, Maine, the lives of the residents are forever changed when a mysterious thick fog rolls into town, bringing with it a myriad of flesh-eating monsters from another world. The story follows David, a local artist who has taken refuge from the invasion inside a local supermarket, along with his young son and several other people from town. Not only will David need to survive the threats from another world hiding in the fog, but also the threats from within as the tension builds among his once friends and neighbors inside the supermarket. This novella is currently set at a 3.95 on Goodreads. Now, I feel like I could realistically include a large number of Stephen King's works in this list. I believe he's talked before about how he's been influenced by the work of Lovecraft, and you can really see it in Stephen King's greater cosmic universe. A couple of really blatant examples would be the man in the black suit, who serves as Stephen King's overarching villain for his universe and his books, and Pennywise is very much Elder God-esque. He's a universe hopper. He feeds on fear. He's an illusionist. He likes madness and chaos. This novella in particular really hits that fear of the unknown that Lovecraft is known for. And for anybody who maybe isn't aware, this novella was also made into a movie a while ago. Like, I think this came out when I was in high school, so it would have been like the early 2000s, I believe, when the movie came out. I recommend both reading the novella and watching the movie because the ending of the movie is actually so much worse, which is really unusual for book adaptations. It's really, really rough. So I recommend starting with the novella first and then watching the movie if you haven't seen the movie yet. Next on my list is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. Area X has been isolated from the rest of the world since the appearance of the Shimmer, a mysterious phenomenon that twists the minds of whoever or whatever sets foot within its influence. Over the years, the government has sent numerous teams to investigate Area X, but each always ends in tragedy. Annihilation follows the 12th expedition, comprising of a team of 4 women, a biologist, an anthropologist, a psychologist, and a surveyor. Annihilation is currently sitting at a 3.72 on Goodreads, and this is another one on my list that has also been adapted into a film somewhat recently. It's really hard to explain what happens in Annihilation. This book is also another really, really slow burn sort of book, which I think might set some people off. I know that bothered people quite a bit in the movie version. The book is similarly paced, unfortunately, so I would say, like, if you didn't like the movie, chances are you're not going to vibe with the book very well. And the book leaves a lot to do with Area X, very ambiguous, which I think the movie tried to course correct for, but it didn't really work as well as intended. I still enjoyed it okay. It's not my favorite of the cosmic horror genre, but I'm putting it in here because I think there's definitely a niche for it, and I think there's going to be people out there who are really going to resonate with this. Annihilation really focuses on its atmosphere and quite a bit of like existential horror. So if that's your bag, I would definitely check this out. It's the first book in a trilogy, but you don't need to read the whole trilogy to really appreciate Annihilation. The other 2 books don't follow it as direct sequels. They're more like expansions on the world, so it's optional. And last on my list is the only book on this list that I own a physical copy of, and that is The House of Leaves by Mark C. Danielewski. This book is thick, and it's a really weird one to try and explain. So the best way I think I can describe this is as a found footage movie in book form. It is about a dude who goes into his elderly neighbor's apartment after the old man has passed away, and he finds this manuscript hidden in a trunk or a drawer or something. And what it is basically a academic paper written about a found footage film called The Navidson Record, which is a movie that does not exist, and also the old man was blind. So this book bounces back and forth between the guy who found the manuscript and his life and his musings and his thoughts. A lot of his thoughts appear as footnotes along the bottoms of the pages of the paper that the old man wrote on the Navidson record. It's twisty and turny, and like it bounces back and forth, and the footnotes are really hard to follow because you've got the main text, which is the Navidson record report. You've got the footnotes from the old man who wrote the report. You've got the footnotes from the dude who found the manuscript, and then you've got additional footnotes from an editor. You've got references to all sorts of studies and stuff that both do and don't exist. And then on top of everything else, if you think that you can just like read this book normally, like I hate to break it to you, but like no, all sorts of weird formatting things. I don't know. Yeah, there we go. It's focusing. All sorts of weird formatting stuff starts happening partway through the book. Like, it looks pretty thick, but then all of a sudden you end up with pages where, like, there's literally a line or two of text. You're constantly, like, turning this book upside down and around. Well, there's some really weird ones. Yeah, here's another weird one. Like... Yeah, like, look at this nonsense. This is a really difficult book to read. In my opinion, it's a lot of work for what's essentially a story about a house that's bigger on the inside. The Navidson family, in the movie that this book talks about, move into this new house, and they find this hallway that's impossible. It doesn't fit within the dimensions of the house itself. The family, when they go in to explore it, find that inside is a labyrinth. Space and time has no meaning within the bounds of this mysterious hallway, which leads to a set of stairs that's depth and length and distance varies depending on the whim of the house, I guess. David Navidson, the guy who owns the house and was recording all of this for the Navidson record, ends up calling in his brother and a few other friends to help him kind of figure out what's going on and document what's going on inside his house. And it's pretty trippy. I won't get too into the nitty-gritty. It's a really weird one to explain. This is why I left this one last. This book is rocking a 4.05 on Goodreads. It is more of a reading experience than it is normal reading. I had a really hard time getting through this book, not because I didn't enjoy it, although there were certainly some parts where I feel like I could have skipped over them and nothing of value would have been lost. I had to keep sticky notes all over this book when I read it originally, and like multiple bookmarks to keep track of the footnotes within footnotes at some point when it really started getting weird. So yeah, this is another one where it's not going to be for everyone. I totally don't blame anybody who could not get through this sucker, but it's an interesting read and it's very much an exercise for your brain. So yeah, that is The House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I will never say that name correctly. And those are all my recommendations for modern cosmic horror novels. Have you read any of the items on this list? Are you interested in any of the items on this list? Is there anything that you would have added to this list? Please put them in the comments below because I'm always looking for something to add to my reading list. And as usual, I would like to end this video with a word from our sponsor, me! For those of you who are new here, I have an account on Redbubble where I post new designs weekly. This is this week's design. I don't quite know at this point which one it will be, but future me will edit it into this void above my hand. So if you see anything there that you like, go ahead and pick one up. No pressure, but it would help me out quite a lot. And that's all for me today. Remember, my children, sometimes when you stare into the void is staring back at you.